Last week we talked about trade wars, what they are, when they're likely to emerge, and what would happen if the United States were to be embroiled in one as a result of President Trump's steel and aluminum tariffs. You guys had some thoughts and some comments, and I have some responses, so let's hop to it. First off, I just want to thank Anton at Aton and Sci-Fi Pie for your guys' help and suggestions. As I mentioned before, I am open to constructive criticisms for, how to make these videos better. Like I said, I want to make these as enjoyable for you guys as possible. So if you have any constructive feedback or criticisms, please let me know. It's how we make this thing better, and, I sincerely appreciate it. Ashley Flynn wonders why, conservatives have this sort of love affair with steel, this romanticism with foundry work and stuff like that, and why we can't just move on to things like, making the world a better place in a more broad sense. But first off, I kind of want to push back on the idea and the notion that this work isn't necessarily very fulfilling. So I did a lot of manual labor growing up. My father owned a hurricane shutter company, and during the summers after I hit about 16, 17, he and I would go out to the field and we would install hurricane shutters together, and that was back-breaking work. But I can tell you honestly, there are a number of days where I'm kind of sitting here now in this PhD program where I think to myself, there are a lot of days then where I would come home feeling more fulfilled, more satisfied than I do on some days like here. And I think part of that becomes that you actually have visual symbols of progress. Like when you put shutters on a house, you see that. When you write 5 pages of a dissertation prospectus like I did before filming this, that's good, that's awesome, but it's not necessarily as visceral. So I think that in that sense, these jobs can be extremely rewarding to the people who decide to pursue them. Another big part obviously comes from the name, right? Conservatives tend to want to keep things the way that they are, at the very least, not push things forward too fast. I think that there's not enough distinction made between conservatives and traditionalists, and I think that the latter are playing a much larger role in the Republican Party than they were maybe 20 years ago. But there's also the fact that these jobs were available for individuals who didn't necessarily want to go embark on a college career. And college isn't necessarily for everyone. I'm a huge proponent of education being for everyone, of everyone learning what they would like to learn and learning for knowledge's sake. But as an institution, right, universities aren't necessarily well equipped or well suited to handle everybody. Just because somebody didn't get a degree doesn't mean that they shouldn't get a job that is, well paying and provides for them and their family and stuff like that. And a lot of these jobs did that, and they did that for areas where a lot of the people weren't necessarily very wealthy, or they didn't come from families that had a lot of advantages and stuff like that. The factory in many ways really represented the heart of the American dream. Somebody can go in, clock in for their 8 hours, provide enough, food for their family to be able to live a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. And for a number of different reasons, that lifestyle is eroding. I mentioned that a big part of that comes from, increases in automation and stuff like that, but there's also the fact that these positions that people thought that they'd be able to have, because their parents, their grandparents, they had them, they're no longer able to get them. Those options are now closed to them, and that causes a certain amount of resentment. But it is tough because we don't necessarily want to keep industries alive just for the nostalgic quality, or just because those were the promises that were given to the parents and the grandparents, right? Progress works by changing how things used to be, and the reason that we are where we are is because we as a country have strode towards economic and technological progress. We'll have to maybe leave, industry work like the steel mills and stuff like that behind as they become increasingly automated and stuff like that. But I think that if we leave them behind, we have to be very careful not to leave the people behind. And right now, I think that they feel like they have been. Dominos argues that war has always been a very costly endeavor, and it tends... Leominus argues that war has always been a very costly endeavor, and that, they tend to be started because of some sort of insults being traded. So my saying that trade wars wouldn't necessarily would be deterred rather because there would be an investment, or that shouldn't happen because there's this huge investment and loss of productivity and profit, doesn't necessarily make sense because you see this similar thing in war. I mentioned in the comment that I wanted to push back on this, and the reason I did is because not all wars start for the same reasons. A huge literature in peace studies, international relations, and comparative politics that look at the multifarious reasons why wars start. In some instances, it does start, as you would suggest, for symbolic reasons, a slight or an insult passed along to a country that they felt just could no longer stand. A lot of times, it's for posturing, it's for hard power, it's for clout, it's for mineral resources, it's for things that are either directly translatable into capital resources, or it is things that, are not too far removed from it. Which is why generally economists say that war is not a good thing to get engaged in generally, because it just tends to wreak the economies, wreak the infrastructure of those nations that are put into place. Similarly, a trade war is not going to be something that people should get involved with either, because that's also going to wreak the infrastructure, just a different kind of infrastructure, right? It's going to be wreaking the economic infrastructure and causing havoc throughout that. Darren Stormwind said that they actually had been discussing this topic recently in class, and was realizing that, it could be possible for the producers to then just raise their prices to be able to extract more money from American consumers, because the tariffs have now come in and they now have more wiggle room, so they could theoretically, like if a tariff made it so that widget A was worth $15, then all the companies producing the widgets would then just have to make it worth $14.99, right? They could have been previously worth $10, but it could cause the price to go up. And he was wondering whether or not there could be some way to prevent this from happening. First off, I always think it's kind of funny when I presage some of your guys' stuff that you're seeing in class or something like that, or I happen to be on the same topic. Dorian Sapien mentioned that he was just happened to wanted to look at this, and they stumbled upon his laptop, which I laughed at the pun, just wanted to let you know. I don't know, the serendipity makes me smile. I'm glad that I'm providing additional insight to the things that you guys are already kind of looking at. That makes me glad. But in answer to your question, it is possible for the US government to be able to prevent these sorts of things in theory, but in practice it may be a lot harder, because the government does prioritize the dynamism of a free market, dynamism of a free market. A lot of air quotes, because the United States market isn't actually a free and pure capitalist system. There are restrictions and regulations that go on with it. But there are laws that do prevent explicit collusion. So if it were to happen that all of the industries were to raise the price of steel or the price of aluminum to some outrageously higher number, I think, and if it were to be shown that they were doing so in a way that communicated with each other or tried to do so that would screw over consumers, that can be stopped, although it would have to be retroactively. And it's the same thing with price gouging. There are laws against price gouging, but those, I am not 100% sure, so don't quote me on this, I think tend to be more readily used in an emergency. At least the last time I saw price gouging stuff happening is when you saw stuff going on with the hurricanes. But in general, the actions that can be done would be retrospective, right? It would be retroactive. They would be doing things in hindsight to be able to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or that it stops doing. There aren't a lot of preventative measures that can happen, because, as I mentioned before, the government does not like to try to impede the process and the progress of the market. That's all the time that we have for today. Guys, thank you so much for your comments. As I mentioned before, I do read all of them and try to respond to as many of them as I can. However, I do have my actual office hours to scram to, so I'm going to have to cut the video. The comments for this video or any thoughts for future ones, leave them down in the comment section below. Look forward to reading them, responding to them. I'll be active as much as I can, and I'll put all the links for everything for the past video and all that other stuff down in the doobly-doo as always, as well as links to the Facebook, Twitter, and the blog. I look forward to seeing you guys out there as well. If you enjoyed this video, hope you consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you want to support this channel, you can continue to do so by commenting down below, by sharing this or other videos that catch your interest, and by subscribing to the channel to stay in the loop for more awesome social science content is uploaded. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.